At my sister's wedding, she introduced me as my unemployed sister who crashed here for free. The crowd laughed. She's been dumped more times than I can count, she added. Then her husband's mother whispered in my ear, I need to talk to you about something urgent. What she revealed turned the whole wedding upside down. So, I'd been in a really weird situation. My sister Camille just got married, and while I was supposed to be happy for her, everything went sideways. To start with, she introduced me at the wedding in front of a huge crowd by saying, "This is my unemployed sister, who crashed at my place for free. Oh, and she's been dumped more times than I can count." The whole crowd laughed, and I just stood there, humiliated. But things took an even more unexpected turn when her new mother-in-law, Mrs. Waverly, pulled me aside and told me something that completely changed the entire dynamic of the wedding. Apparently, Nicholas, her new husband, had been hiding something big, a secret that, if revealed, could bring everything crashing down. I'd been dreading Camille's wedding for months. We've always had a complicated relationship. She was the golden child growing up, the one with the perfect grades, the perfect friends, and the perfect life. I was, well, not. I'd never been able to live up to her standard. I wasn't exactly a failure, but life had a way of throwing curveballs my way. My relationships never lasted, my job as a freelance writer didn't provide the financial stability I hoped for, and I found myself living in my younger sister's guest bedroom, trying to get my life together. Camille was kind enough to let me stay with her when things got rough, but we never really connected beyond the surface. I could tell she looked down on me, maybe not consciously, but it was there in the way she spoke to me, in her passive-aggressive comments, in the way she compared me to her perfect life. Still, I wanted to support her. This wedding was her dream, and no matter how complicated our relationship was, she was my sister. So, I put on my best face, tried to ignore the tension between us, and went to Napa for the event. The venue was beautiful, a vineyard surrounded by rolling hills. The ceremony was gorgeous, too. Nicholas, her fiancé, looked every bit the part of the perfect man, tall, handsome, charming, and successful. He seemed like everything Camille had always dreamed of. Everyone around me was in awe of how perfect the day was. But as the reception started and the speeches began, I felt my stomach twist into knots. Camille stood up, holding her glass of champagne, ready to make her toast. She smiled, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and then began introducing the people around her. "And of course, there's my sister Sienna," Camille said, her voice warm but with a note I couldn't quite place. "She's here today, even though she's between jobs at the moment." The room was filled with polite laughter. I forced a smile, my stomach sinking. I hated that she'd pointed that out, but it was nothing I hadn't heard before. Camille always had a way of making my situation sound like a punchline. Then she added, "Oh, and I think it's safe to say Sienna's had a few relationships that didn't quite work out. She's been dumped more times than I can count." I think we all lost track. Another round of laughter followed, and I could feel my face turning red. The worst part? It wasn't even a joke anymore. It was her way of reminding everyone how much better her life was than mine. I couldn't believe she was doing this at her wedding. I tried to laugh it off, trying to be the bigger person. But deep down, the humiliation burned. I was the older sister, shouldn't I be the one people looked up to? Shouldn't I be the one with the life that was on track? But Camille wasn't done. "Oh, and Sienna's been crashing at my place for the last 6 months, she continued. "You know, she's figuring things out. I'm happy to help her out, though." Her tone was too sweet, almost sickly so, and I could feel everyone's eyes on me. By now, my hands were shaking. I had always been the one who tried to keep the peace, the one who didn't make waves. But this was too much. She had embarrassed me in front of her entire guest list, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could take it. Just as I was about to slip away and hide in the corner, I felt someone tap my shoulder. I turned to find Mrs. Waverly, Nicholas's mother, standing behind me. I didn't have much interaction with her, and the few times we'd spoken, she had always been polite but distant. Can I have a word with you, Sienna? She asked in a quiet voice, almost as if she was hesitant to speak in front of the others. I was taken aback, but I nodded, following her toward a quieter area of the venue. Something's wrong, Sienna, she said, her voice low. I need to tell you something about Nicholas. I felt my heart drop. Nicholas was perfect, wasn't he? The kind of man who could do no wrong. What could she possibly mean? What is it? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to say this, but you need to know the truth, Mrs. Waverly continued. Nicholas is not who he says he is. And it's something that could ruin everything, his marriage to Camille, everything. My heart started pounding. What was she talking about? I had never suspected anything was off about Nicholas. He seemed so put together, so genuine, the perfect match for Camille. He's been hiding something from everyone, Mrs. Waverly went on, looking around nervously. Something he's been keeping secret for a long time, and if Camille knew, it would destroy everything. I stared at her, confused. What kind of secret? She glanced over her shoulder again, as if making sure no one was nearby. I've been trying to figure out how to tell her. But you need to know, Sienna. Before she marries him, you need to know the truth. I'm not sure what you'll do with this information, but it's not something you can ignore. I felt a knot in my stomach. What could he have been hiding? Mrs. Waverly reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. She handed it to me, and I felt the weight of it immediately. This is all the proof you need, she said quietly. Read it when you can. Just. Please be careful. I don't want to see my son hurt your sister, but if you can't stop it, at least make sure she knows what she's getting into. I stared at the envelope, the urgency of her words sinking in. It wasn't just a secret. It was something big. Something serious enough to destroy Camille's whole life if she found out. Mrs. Waverly gave me a tight-lipped smile, and then, without another word, turned and walked away, blending back into the crowd. I stood there, staring down at the envelope in my hands. My heart was racing, my mind spinning. Should I open it? Should I confront Camille? What if I made things worse? The last thing I wanted to do was destroy her wedding, but what if she was about to marry a man who didn't deserve her? And what if I had the power to stop it? My mind kept coming back to Mrs. Waverly's words, before she marries him, you need to know the truth. But did I have the right to reveal something that could tear her life apart? Would Camille even believe me, or would she think I was just trying to hamper her happiness? I slipped the envelope into my bag, my hands trembling. I wasn't sure what to do next. But I couldn't ignore it. Not now. Not after what I'd just heard. The rest of the evening went by in a blur. I could hear the music, see people dancing, but all I could focus on was the envelope, heavy with secrets, burning a hole in my mind. What was Nicholas hiding? And what should I do about it? The night dragged on. I couldn't shake the feeling that the world around me was moving fast forward while I stood frozen, paralyzed by the weight of what I had just learned. The laughter, the clinking of glasses, the chatter of guests, none of it seemed real. It was all just noise, a distraction from the pounding questions in my head. I kept replaying Mrs. Waverly's words in my mind, Nicholas is not who he says he is. He's been hiding something from everyone. What could he possibly be hiding? He had always been charming, the perfect fiancé, the perfect future husband. He was exactly the kind of man Camille had dreamed about since we were kids. Camille had always prided herself on picking the right guy, the one who checked off every box. And Nicholas seemed to do just that. I couldn't fathom how anyone could have hidden something so big from her. But Mrs. Waverly's serious tone, the look in her eyes, those couldn't be faked. She was telling me the truth, or at least part of it. I glanced over at Camille, her smile radiant as she talked to some of her friends, still basking in the afterglow of her wedding day. She looked so happy, so in love. For a moment, I almost reconsidered everything. I could just leave things as they were. After all, who was I to stand in the way of her happiness? But then I thought about everything she had said about me. About how she had used me as the punchline of a joke in front of everyone, in front of all those people who would remember it for years to come. The embarrassment had cut deeper than I cared to admit, and part of me felt a need to make things right, not just for myself, but for Camille, too. How could she build a future on a foundation of lies? She deserved to know, didn't she? I wasn't going to sit back and let her walk into a marriage that could come crashing down because of something she didn't know. But there was still so much I didn't understand. What was Nicholas hiding? And how would I even begin to bring it up to her? How would I explain to my sister that everything she thought she knew about her perfect life was built on a lie? My hand reached into my bag, touching the envelope Mrs. Waverly had given me. I pulled it out, feeling its weight in my palm. It wasn't large, just a simple cream-colored envelope with no markings or labels. I could feel my heart racing as I stared at it, wondering what could be inside that would turn everything upside down. Before I could open it, my thoughts were interrupted by a soft voice beside me. "Sienna?" I turned and found my mother standing there, looking at me with concern. Her brow furrowed slightly as she glanced down at the envelope in my hand. "Are you all right?" "You barely said 2 words all night," she said, her voice tinged with worry. My mother had always been perceptive, and I could tell she knew something was off. I tried to smile, to appear as if everything was fine, but I'm sure it didn't come across well. "I'm fine, Mom. Just tired, I guess." She didn't buy it. "Don't lie to me. I can tell when something's bothering you." I hesitated, unsure of what to say. There was no way I could explain everything to her, not in the middle of Camille's wedding. But I also didn't want to keep it all inside. "It's just the wedding," I said quietly. "I don't know, Mom. I thought I could get through this, but I just feel out of place. And then Camille, she said things about me, things in front of everyone, and I don't know if I can just pretend everything's okay anymore." My mother sighed, her face softening with understanding. "Camille doesn't always think before she speaks. You know how she is. But I know she loves you, Sienna. She's just always had a different way of showing it." "I don't know, Mom," I murmured. "I don't feel like she's ever really seen me for who I am. It's always about her, her perfect life, her perfect marriage. I've never felt like I mattered to her, and tonight it's too much." She placed a gentle hand on my arm. "I know it hurts, sweetheart. But Camille is your sister. No matter what happens tonight, don't forget that. She needs you." I nodded, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something more was at play here. Camille may have always been the golden child, but there was something darker lurking behind the surface, something I didn't understand. The tension between us, the way she had humiliated me in front of everyone, it was hard to just brush it off. But then, as if my mind wasn't racing enough already, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a text from Camille. "Hey, are you doing okay? I know you seemed a little off earlier. Let's talk later, okay?" I stared at the message for a moment, feeling a mix of frustration and exhaustion. She didn't even seem to understand the gravity of what she had said to me earlier, and now, here she was, texting like nothing had happened. It felt hollow, almost insincere. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was Mrs. Waverly. My pulse quickened as I read her message. "Please don't say anything to Camille just yet. I'll explain everything tomorrow. We need to talk more in person. I'm serious, Sienna. Please wait." I swallowed hard. Wait. Mrs. Waverly was telling me to wait. But for how long? How long could I keep this secret from Camille? How long before whatever Nicholas was hiding exploded in her face? I looked back at my sister, still surrounded by friends, laughing and enjoying the celebration. I couldn't stand the thought of letting her marry a man who might tear her world apart, no matter how perfect he seemed on the surface. But I also didn't know what would happen if I told her. Would she listen? Would she believe me? Or would she push me away, thinking I was just trying to hamper her happiness? And what if, in the end, Mrs. Waverly was right, and there was no way to stop the inevitable? I glanced down at the envelope in my hand, then back to Camille, still lost in her perfect world, unaware of the storm that was quietly brewing. The weight of the decision pressed down on me with increasing force. I was standing on the edge of a precipice, unsure of whether I should take the leap into the unknown or retreat back into silence. The wedding, the laughter, the food, all of it felt so far away, so irrelevant in that moment. All that mattered was the truth. And if I was going to be the one to deliver it, I had to be sure of one thing: was I willing to destroy my sister's life, even if it meant saving her from a marriage built on lies? The evening stretched on, but every moment felt heavier than the last. The music played on, the laughter bubbled up from the crowd, and the lights twinkled overhead, but none of it reached me. I felt like an outsider in my own family, trapped between the pull of loyalty to my sister and the weight of a truth that threatened to unravel everything. I looked down at the envelope again, my fingers trembling slightly as I clutched it. Mrs. Waverly had been clear in her warning: please wait. Wait for what? The truth she wanted to tell me, I assumed. The truth that could bring down a wedding, tear apart Camille's life, and change everything. I wanted to trust Mrs. Waverly. After all, she was Nicholas's mother, and she seemed genuinely concerned. But then I thought about Camille, my sister, who had been the picture of perfect happiness all night. She was so in love with Nicholas, so convinced that this was the man she was going to spend the rest of her life with. I couldn't just swoop in and tell her everything was a lie, could I? The more I thought about it, the more I realized how dangerous this all was. If I told Camille what I knew, if I confronted Nicholas or revealed whatever secret he was hiding, it could destroy her entire world. She might never speak to me again. She might choose him over me, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing her completely. But then again, if I didn't say anything, and Nicholas's secret eventually came to light, how could I live with myself knowing I had kept quiet? How could I look my sister in the eye, knowing that I'd let her marry a man who was hiding something so important from her? I felt caught in an impossible situation. My mother, sensing my inner turmoil, took a seat beside me at the table, the clink of her champagne glass against the metal table the only sound between us. She didn't say anything at first, just sat there quietly, as though waiting for me to speak. Finally, I turned to her. Mom, do you think it's ever right to tell someone something that could destroy their happiness, even if you know it's true? Her brow furrowed, and she studied me for a long moment, her eyes narrowing in thought. I think you have to be careful, Sienna. Sometimes the truth is necessary, but other times, it's better to let people figure things out for themselves. I sighed. But what if they're about to make a huge mistake? What if they're about to marry someone who isn't who they thought they were? Mom placed her hand gently on mine. You can't make that decision for her, sweetheart. Camille's an adult. She's going to have to make her own choices, even if they're the wrong ones. The best thing you can do is be there for her, no matter what. I shook my head, frustration boiling up inside me. It's not that simple, Mom. This isn't just about Camille's happiness. It's about her future. It's about whether or not she's marrying a man she can trust. Mom didn't respond immediately, and I felt the weight of the decision pressing down on me again. I had always trusted my mom's judgment. She had always been the one to guide me through difficult situations, but this time I wasn't sure her advice would help. What if she was wrong? What if keeping quiet would only make things worse? I glanced back over at Camille. She was dancing now, laughing with her friends, her eyes locked on Nicholas, who was standing nearby, watching her with an expression of adoration. They looked perfect together. It was hard to imagine anything that could ruin this. But then I remembered Mrs. Waverly's words: he's been hiding something from everyone. That nagging thought kept running through my mind, a constant refrain that I couldn't shake. What was he hiding? I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor as I pushed it back. Mom raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. She knew that look. It was the same one I had whenever I made a decision, impulsive, driven by an overwhelming sense of urgency. I needed answers. Now. I walked across the room, the envelope still in my hand, my heart thudding in my chest. I had to know what was inside. There was no way I could make any decision about what to do next without knowing the full truth. I found a quiet spot in the corner of the venue, behind a large potted plant. The noise of the reception faded into the background as I opened the envelope, tearing it carefully along the seam. My hands were clammy, my mind racing with possibilities, but none of them seemed to make sense. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper, typed, not handwritten, and a few photos. My stomach lurched as I unfolded the paper and began reading. The letter was short, but it was enough to make my blood run cold. Nicholas had a history of fraud. Financial fraud. He had been involved in a scheme with an ex-business partner that had cost several people their life savings. The pictures showed Nicholas in meetings, shaking hands with men whose faces I didn't recognize. There were documents detailing fraudulent transactions, fake investments, and a trail of money that led straight to Nicholas. The letter explained that the legal proceedings had been quietly settled years ago, and Nicholas had somehow managed to keep it all under wraps. The documents were old, the photos were blurry, but the evidence was clear. Nicholas had been part of a criminal operation that he'd never told anyone about, least of all Camille. I felt a wave of nausea rise in my throat as I finished reading. This wasn't just some minor secret. This was a betrayal on a massive scale. He had lied to Camille, to everyone, for years. How could someone hide something like that? How could he live with himself? I sat down on a nearby bench, feeling the weight of the envelope pressing down on my lap. I didn't know what to do with this information. I didn't know how to even begin to explain this to Camille. But the truth was now undeniable. Nicholas wasn't who he appeared to be. And Camille needed to know. I folded the letter and slipped it back into the envelope. My mind was in overdrive, my emotions a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and anger. I couldn't tell her tonight, not in the middle of this celebration. The wedding was still going on. She was still blissfully unaware. But how long could I wait? How long could I keep this secret? I had one choice in front of me now. I could walk away, keep my mouth shut, and let Camille marry him, never telling her the truth. Or I could tell her everything and risk everything I had left with her. And as the music played on in the distance, as the evening wore on, I realized one thing. There would never be a perfect moment to reveal this. There would never be a right time. I had to decide. Would I be the one to protect my sister's happiness, even if it meant keeping quiet about the truth? Or would I be the one to tear her world apart, all in the name of honesty? I stood there, my mind running through every possible outcome, the weight of the envelope still heavy in my hands. The music from the reception was a distant hum now, just background noise to the chaos brewing in my head. There was no escaping this decision anymore. I could feel the tension in my chest, each breath heavier than the last. The reality of what I had discovered about Nicholas kept crashing over me. How had I not seen it? How had no one seen it? And the biggest question, how could I stand by and let Camille marry a man who had been hiding something so big? But I couldn't just walk up to her in the middle of her wedding and destroy everything. No, I needed a plan. A strategy. Something that would allow me to protect my sister without turning her world upside down in one fell swoop. I made my decision at that moment. I wasn't going to destroy her happiness. But I wasn't going to let Nicholas get away with his lies either. Not without facing the consequences. I slipped the envelope back into my bag and made my way to the reception hall, my heart still pounding. Camille was standing near the dance floor, laughing with a group of her friends, her face glowing. She looked so innocent, so unaware of the storm that had just threatened to consume everything she had worked so hard for. But that's when I saw him. Nicholas. He was talking to some of the other guests, his usual charming smile plastered on his face, his body language confident, as if he knew that the night was his. That everything was perfect. I felt the familiar pang of anger stir in me. This man, this liar, was about to ruin everything. But I had a plan. It wasn't going to be as dramatic as a public confrontation. No, I'd learned that much the hard way. The truth would come out, but it would be on my terms. I walked up to Nicholas, my footsteps deliberate, steady. He glanced up at me as I approached, his smile faltering for a split second. I didn't acknowledge the flicker of nervousness that crossed his face. Instead, I stood there, calm, collected. "Can I talk to you for a second?" I asked, my voice low but firm. He hesitated for a moment, his eyes scanning my face as if trying to figure out if something was wrong. But then he nodded. "Of course, Sienna. What's up?" We moved a few steps away from the crowd, just far enough so that we were out of earshot. I didn't want anyone else to hear what was about to be said, but I needed him to know that I wasn't going to let this slide. "I know what you've been hiding," I said quietly, my eyes locking with his. I could see a flicker of panic behind his confident exterior, and I relished it. He had no idea how much I knew. His face paled slightly, but he recovered quickly. "What are you talking about, Sienna?" he said, trying to play it cool. "I don't know what you mean." I held up a hand, stopping him before he could continue. "Don't lie to me. I know about the fraud, Nicholas. I know everything." His eyes widened for just a fraction of a second, but it was enough to confirm everything. He knew I had him. He knew that his perfect little world was about to shatter. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice tight, a hint of desperation creeping in. "You have no proof." "I don't need proof," I replied coolly, taking a step closer. "I know what's in that envelope. I know everything about your little scheme. And you won't get away with it." For a moment, he just stared at me, and I saw his mind racing. Then, his eyes narrowed. "So, what do you want, Sienna? You're threatening me now? What is this, some kind of blackmail?" I shook my head, the disgust rising in me at his arrogance. "This isn't blackmail, Nicholas. This is me giving you a choice. You can come clean to Camille right now, tell her everything, or I will. The truth will come out one way or another. But if you don't come clean, I'll make sure it's you who ends up in the spotlight, not her. I'll make sure she knows the truth, and you'll lose everything. Your reputation, your future with her, everything." He took a step back, his face contorted with anger. "You wouldn't dare," he hissed. "You think I'm afraid of you? I've been untouchable for years." "Not anymore," I said, my voice steady. "You're not untouchable, Nicholas. You're a liar, and you've been lying to everyone, including Camille. You owe her the truth, whether you like it or not." For a moment, he looked like he was about to explode. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched, but then something seemed to snap in his mind. He let out a breath, visibly trying to calm himself. "You wouldn't," he repeated, but this time, there was no confidence in his voice. There was fear. "You wouldn't destroy her like that." "I'm not going to destroy her," I said softly, my gaze hard. "But you are, if you don't come clean." Nicholas stared at me for a long moment, his gaze shifting between me and the door to the reception. I knew what he was thinking. He was weighing his options. And in that moment, I saw him make a choice. "Fine," he said, his voice low, barely audible. "I'll tell her. But you'd better keep your mouth shut until I do." This conversation never happened. I nodded, relieved that he was going to do the right thing. Or at least, the least damaging thing. "Good. If you tell her, I'll back off. But if you don't, I won't hesitate to let her know everything. I'm not going to let you get away with this." He turned on his heel and walked away, his shoulders stiff, his face set in a scowl. I stood there for a moment, watching him retreat into the crowd. My heart was still pounding, but I felt a sense of satisfaction wash over me. It wasn't just about protecting my sister, it was about making sure that Nicholas faced the consequences of his actions. He wasn't going to ruin Camille's life, not if I could help it. The wedding continued, and I saw Camille again, surrounded by friends, still glowing with happiness. But this time I felt a little lighter. The decision had been made. I wasn't going to destroy her happiness, but I wasn't going to let Nicholas destroy her either. It wasn't long before I saw Camille and Nicholas walking over to where I stood. Nicholas was tense, his hands in his pockets, and Camille was smiling brightly, oblivious to the storm brewing. As they approached, Nicholas shot me a look, but it was more resigned now, less confident than before. Camille stopped in front of me, her face glowing with that familiar brightness. "Sienna," she said cheerfully, "we're so glad you could be here tonight." I smiled at her, forcing myself to push all the tension aside. "Of course, Camille. I wouldn't miss it for the world." She smiled back, then glanced at Nicholas. "Well, we're going to go make a round with the guests. But I'm so glad we've had this time together. I know we haven't always been close, but I really appreciate you being here." I nodded, trying to hold back the lump in my throat. "I'm happy for you, Camille. I just want you to be happy." She smiled, a little more warmly this time, and then turned to walk away with Nicholas. But as they left, I caught his eye once more. This time, there was no bravado, no confidence in his stare. There was only the weight of the secret he had been forced to confess. The wedding carried on. But for once, I felt a sense of peace. The truth would come out. Nicholas would face his consequences, and Camille would learn who her husband truly was. And while I couldn't protect her from everything, I had made sure that she wouldn't walk into a marriage built on lies. That was enough.